Rings of Power recently came out, and everyone seems to be up in arms about how woke this is, with even Daddy Elon throwing his hat into the ring to tell everybody how terrible it is. The general complaint seems to be that male characters are cowards, jerks, or otherwise just useless, whereas the main female character, Gladriel, is just this perfect embodiment of perfection. She's always just, she's always right, etc., etc. You know the deal. Now, rather than delve into the plot like I usually do, I really just don't feel like it because I don't really feel like a lot would come from it, right? It's pretty uneventful at the moment, and there's only 2 episodes out, I think. So I figured I'd just kind of delve into this assumption instead. Uh, Modern media is kind of plagued by this presumption that the content intends to be woke, is essentially the belief that something is going to convey an overly politically correct opinion, sacrifice story for elements of inclusion, and otherwise perpetuate this idea that the cis straight white male is the worst thing that's ever happened and the source of all evil, and blah 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 blah. You know the deal. If you've seen a woke piece of media, you probably know what it is, which has kind of become a joke. Get woke, go broke. So if you sacrifice your creativity and your storytelling for the ideology of inclusiveness and basically trying to preach a political opinion, odds are no one's going to want it. It's not going to be good, and therefore you are going to go broke. Get woke, go broke. Blah. But when it comes down to it, is Rings of Power a woke piece of media? And I think a lot of people are going to disagree with me, but I don't think it is. It does not seem very woke to me. The most obvious thing that stuck out to me while watching this show was the diversity, the forced diversity, really. It did seem to be very, very inclusive. They were definitely trying to meet a diversity quota. And I know the more ravenous fan base of Lord of the Rings is going to say that this is horrible because the original trilogy or whatever is based in this area of Greenland or whatever the fuck it is. I don't pay attention to it and I don't know, but I know that the general complaint is that this story is based in an area where everyone is one skin color. So if you start throwing in all these random races that shouldn't be there, then it's kind of unfaithful to the source material. But here's the thing, I don't think in this day and age that's ever going to happen. This is just the way that modern Hollywood kind of thinks right now. And trying to argue against that is just not going to turn out well. To them, if they do not meet the certain criteria of diversity or whatever, they risk upsetting their peers who are just as likely to throw them under the bus as they are anyone else. And in that business, it's literally like cannibalism. You just consume your friends, you know? And I'll be honest, I don't really feel too strong either way about this. I just think it is really obvious to tell when they are trying to cast diversity rather than just casting people who portray the character the way that it's intended to be portrayed. And I've said before that I'm super disappointed that modern Hollywood has kind of taught me to see race and gender before anything else rather than like seeing the character or how they behave. The first thing that I'll notice about someone is their race or their gender. And I always get people that say, you know, if you look at race or gender first, then that's a you problem. You are a sexist and or a racist. And it's like, no. If you look at any of these interviews with directors or these actors, they are always patting themselves on the back for being inclusive and diverse. Like they deserve this hero award for being just this pioneer of something that's never been done before. And I just think it's stupid. But because of that, I've just kind of got it in my head of why was this person cast? Probably to meet a quota, instead of like actually genuinely thinking that they deserve this role. I mean, I remember being a kid and loving Michelle Rodriguez in Resident Evil or Ripley in Alien, Sarah Connor in Terminator. I used to think Spawn and Blade were like two of the coolest fucking characters in the world. And now, if you say you don't like a character or a movie, you're automatically racist, misogynistic, blah, blah, blah. You're against the tide, whatever it is. So, by knowing the intent behind casting in most Hollywood movies, I've been kind of trained to just pay attention to this, and I don't like it, but it's just the way things are. Rings of Power is definitely forcing diversity, but there is still some enjoyment in these characters. So I don't understand what the real complaint is. Well, Daddy Elon mentions this in a tweet, just a banger tweet, where he says Tolkien is turning in his grave. Almost every male character so far is a coward, a jerk, or both. Only only Galadriel is brave, smart, and nice. Now I'm gonna do something I've never done before, and I'm gonna disagree with Elon here. I don't agree with this statement. In the beginning of the first episode, Galadriel's brother is killed in a conflict with Sauron, and she makes it her personal duty to hunt him down and kill him. After seemingly endless pursuits through these harsh environments on mere suspicion, Galadriel and her company of about, I don't know, 7 or 8 finally make some headway. However, Galadriel is not a glorified hero in this moment. She is arrogant, unwilling to turn away from her obsessive hunt for Sauron to the point where she is willingly disregarding the wishes of her king and endangering her company. Which, to be fair, what kind of psychopath thinks taking a handful of elves against a dude that rolls around with literal armies would in any way work? Her companions eventually decide they are tired of following her on her revenge path and give her an ultimatum. She can go alone or she can return home with them. She returns home, is honored a hero, and her ignoring commands of her king is allowed to slip, with her and her company being offered the chance to go to the elven afterlife, and I still don't know what the fuck that is. They eventually do, Galadriel deciding that she must continue her quest while the rest of her company decides to go into peaceful eternity or whatever. She comes across some floating wreckage and is stranded with a dude who claims his home was destroyed by orcs. She demands he tell her where they are so that they can pursue Sauron or whatever, and he basically tells her, fuck you, I'm not going to. Even in this moment, Galadriel she is not a nice person. She is not just. She is obsessed and willing to endanger this other person specifically for her own wishes. Later on, she literally straps herself to this wreckage during a storm and gets sucked in the ocean because she's, again, literally tied herself to it like the Pirates of the Caribbean scene, and she gets saved by this guy that she paraded or whatever. And I mean, it doesn't seem like she's always right or just, and this guy clearly isn't weak or a jerk. It doesn't really make too much sense where they're getting all this her being this perfect symbol from. I mean, sure, she's still right about Sauron being a threat, and I just don't think that that's that big of a deal. That's not that impressive. That doesn't set her apart from everyone. She thinks that the evil witch king dude that fucking tried to take over the world is still out there and is evil. Fucking really breaking the ground there, are we? But it's not like she's this divine being that is untouchable and beyond fathom, you know? She is a grieving immortal that has defined her purpose through revenge. That's it. So the main complaint seems to be that male characters are cowards and jerks. That's it, right? Her company that decides not to follow her, and you can't really blame them for that, right? She seems like obsessed. She's beyond reason. Who would continue to follow this person that just made you scale a fucking giant mountain and you guys almost died in a blizzard because she wants to 1v1 this evil wizard, right? That makes sense. That makes sense for them to abandon her. But what other male characters do we have? Well, if I think about it, there are 5 real relationships in this show right now. 5 actual, I guess you could say, plots. This hobbit girl and this magical wizard guy, neither of which are particularly anything. I'm sure it has meaning. I'm just not interested in it, like genuinely. You have Galadriel and this guy who saves her life. Again, Galadriel is not glorified in this relationship and actually comes off as the annoying bad guy. She is selfish. You have this elf guy and human woman whose names currently elude me, but the elf guy actively endangers himself while attempting to discover the corruption spreading throughout the lands. He is neither cowardly nor a dick. You have Elrond and this other elf guy who is determined to create weapons of mass destruction or something. Wink, wink. And the major focus seems to be on Elrond and the dwarf prince Durin. Elrond initially invokes a challenge in order to receive an audience with Durin, who holds a grudge against Elrond. They were close friends, and Elrond had not visited Durin in nearly 20 years. He berates Elrond, as that time is nothing to an elf, but in that time, Durin almost experienced a lifetime. He has been married and has had children, all of which Elrond missed. So initially, he refuses to hear Elrond's proposal out of spite. But I'm not going to sit around and pretend that that isn't a good relationship development. That makes sense. Elrond's detachment makes sense, and Durin's anger and bitter behavior towards Elrond is justified. This is decent storytelling. It's not that strange. Disa, Durin's wife, does somewhat diffuse their disagreement, but it also makes sense. Disa had heard stories of Elrond and was excited to finally meet him. I just don't see where this belief that the men are cowards or jerks is coming from, unless, of course, you only watch the first couple minutes of the first episode and don't bother going past it. So far, the only really woke thing about this show is, again, the inclusive bits. That's it. I feel like there's this constant stigma with new shows and movies where people are just way too quick on the draw with calling something woke. And I don't think just having a diverse cast or inclusiveness it constitutes as being woke, right? It's if there was like some random same-sex couple of elves or like some random elf that went out of their way to say that they don't adhere to gender norms, and everybody kind of like is angry about that for some reason and kind of ostracizes that person, or maybe like the black elves receive racism more than the normal elves do because for some reason humans hate black elves more than they hate normal elves, whatever. If there was some obvious example of them pushing like a real world political, social political issue into their stuff and not doing it like nicely in a muddy way, I could understand it being woke. But so far, what I've seen is not woke at all. There's no real woke agenda right now. It's just a story. There's nothing there. Now I could definitely eat my words on this, right? In the next few episodes, it could fucking just snowball out of control. But right now, it's really not that bad. It's nothing crazy. It's definitely not like the best fucking show I've ever seen. But it's definitely not something that would make Tolkien turn in his grave, I don't think. And I'm sure there are Lord of the Ring fans out there that are absolutely obsessed with the lore and will point out that this is not accurate or whatever, and this blah 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 blah. Okay, but again, this is not something that I am particularly a fanboy of. I'm not overly obsessed with this series. I'm not super invested in it. I'm just watching it because it popped up on my feed on Prime. Okay, that's the only reason. I didn't even like the Hobbit trilogy. All right, I thought that fucking sucked. The original Lord of the Rings trilogy was fucking awesome, but everything else just sucks. So from like a regular standpoint, it's not woke. It's really not. And I think people need to or at least I feel like YouTube commentators in particular, right? The ones that are I gotta say it because it's mostly the Republican right wing side kind of. They're way too quick on the gun to just label something woke and like write it off and say it's trash, right? It just something can be shitty and not be woke, right? Something can be bad story writing and not be woke, and something can be woke and still have good story writing in it. Okay, it's not that difficult a concept to like come to terms with, But that's not what get likes. That's not what gets promoted, right? You have to, if you really want to get your shit out there and make it mainstream and make the algorithm happy, you gotta smash it and say that it's woke and that it's garbage and this is social justice bullshit and blah 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 blah. But it's not. Thank you for watching, ladies and gentlemen. If you would like to, you can feel free to go over to twitch.tv/isnoe. Drop me a follow there because that's usually where I tend to play video games, and it's a lot easier to talk to me if you need to. Other than that, thanks for watching.